Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. 2 years since catastrophe. People upended by the massive floods in the Fraser Valley say they need more protection from an American river. And the U.S. mayor agrees. While people in Meritt wait for more help after the floods forced them from their homes. And pick your own Kris Kringle. Santa Clauses are coming to Metrotown for the holiday season.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. 2 years ago this week, catastrophic flooding hit our province, tearing up homes, livelihoods, and roads. Cities that bore the brunt of the damage say they're now more prepared to cope with another disaster. But the threat of a river in the U.S. connected to the Fraser Valley looms large. Michelle Gassoub reports on the challenge of mitigating floodwaters that flow across an international border.
2 years ago, the Fraser Valley was devastated by what was called a once-in-a-century flood. Homes and highways were destroyed and thousands forced to flee.
The water was rising and rising because of the breach and rising, and then I was told to evacuate.
Since then, 17 kilometers of dikes in Abbotsford have been raised by half a meter and major breaches have been fixed. But the fear of another flood lingers.
They should be doing a little bit more and quickly. Like, we can't go through something like that again. They have to do something with the American River.
The American River he's talking about is the Nooksack in Washington state. When it overflows, its floodwaters pour into the Sumas River, then cross the border into Abbotsford. Most of the time, the Barrowtown pump station keeps that water at bay. But 2 years ago, there was disaster here.
We're in a much better spot than we were in 2021, and we are hopeful that that's not going to happen.
The mayor of Abbotsford says the city has undertaken a major effort to fortify what it can on this side of the border. But an existential challenge is how to manage the water that is not in Canada's jurisdiction. Last month, officials on the Canadian and American sides signed a transboundary agreement to address Nooksack flooding, but it came with no monetary commitments or timeline, only a promise.
I'm comfortable that right now that we will come to arrangement that will work for both countries. But I can tell you that our folks who are negotiating things now will be making sure that they have the Canadian interests in mind.
Across the border in Sumas, the hardest hit American community, the mayor says he wasn't included and that not enough is being done.
It was a little embarrassing, actually. You know, the leadership doesn't know that that's going on. If it were up to me, I'd be down there with a shovel right now, right?
In the 1990s, a cross-border task force was formed to research solutions after the Nooksack River overflowed its banks. In the end, no actions were taken. There is hope this time will be different. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
Meanwhile, almost 2 years have passed since torrential rain and floodwaters devastated the city of Meritt. Everyone in the town of 7,000 were forced to evacuate after the Coldwater River burst its banks and the city's wastewater treatment plant failed. The flood caused $150 million in damages, with hundreds of properties and farmland wiped out. And 2 years later, some people are still waiting to go home.
I lost my trailer. I now live in this motorhome, but it's home. What can you say? That's all I can do. I don't know what's going to happen from day to day. I just go, each day I get up, and every day I get up is a new day. So.
The mayor of Meritt says the city is still waiting on funding from the province and Ottawa to protect the community from future floods. Repairs to the Coquihalla Highway, meanwhile, are complete 2 years after parts of it were wiped out by the 2021 flooding. The transportation minister says all 6 bridges have been permanently rebuilt and all lanes in both directions are open to traffic.
We've now basically charted a new course using climate science and engineering advice on how to build resilient infrastructure. And the new Coquihalla is built to a very strong standard.
The highway's new bridges have deep pile footings and longer spans to withstand high water levels, rock protection to prevent erosion, and improved drainage along the road. A new report commissioned by BC's wine-growing industry suggests they need a massive replanting of vineyards. The threat of climate change and viral diseases there are to blame, but replanting thousands of acres of vine grapes does not come cheap. The report indicates more than $300 million is needed. BC's Agriculture Ministry says it will continue to work with wine growers to support recovery from last year's devastating cold snap. It's also looking at an expanded replanting program to meet the growing demand. We have a food warning to tell you about tonight. The BC Centre for Disease Control wants you to know about a salmonella outbreak linked to imported Malachita cantaloupes. The centre says 8 cases of salmonella have been confirmed in BC since mid-November among people living in the Vancouver coastal, Fraser Health, and Island Health regions. Symptoms include diarrhea, abdominal pain, fever, nausea, and vomiting. The centre advises people not to eat cantaloupes branded as Malachita that were sold from October 11th to November 14th. Instead, just throw them out. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is facing criticism over his recent comments about the Israel-Hamas war. Trudeau called on Israel to use, quote, maximum restraint and cautioned that the world is watching. Last night, meanwhile, protests against the PM here in Vancouver got ugly, demanding he fully support a ceasefire. Rafi Boudjikanian has more in a political bind on both sides.
I urge the government of Israel to exercise maximum restraint.
Justin Trudeau on the conflict in Gaza Tuesday night.
The world is watching on TV, on social media. We're hearing the testimonies of doctors, family members.
Words with no change in policy with regards to support for Israel, but the change in tone got a reaction from that country's leader just hours later. It is not Israel that is deliberately targeting civilians, but Hamas that beheaded, burnt, and massacred civilians in the worst horrors perpetrated on Jews since the Holocaust. And the forces of civilization must back Israel, he said.
Call for ceasefire! You have to die! Please. You have blood on your hands!
Not long after that, Trudeau found himself hounded at a restaurant in BC by pro-Palestinian protesters. 250 of them, Vancouver police say.
People are frustrated because Canada has not taken that position. Justin Trudeau has not taken that position of a ceasefire.
Asked about the Prime Minister's comments today, this is how Chrystia Freeland responded.
The humanitarian situation in Gaza is heartbreaking. It's really difficult to see the images of what's happening.
While Jewish and Muslim community groups in Canada are unsatisfied for different reasons.
Delivered sharply and curtly, with the accusation of Israel killing of women, killing of children, killing of babies, really was something that did not properly contextualize how we got here.
The fact that the Canadian Prime Minister has clearly decried the killing of women and children and babies and has clearly said it needs to stop, we think that that is an important and a positive step, but we need to see more. Canada needs to take a leading role internationally in terms of advocating for a ceasefire.
The debate has divided Parliament too. The Conservatives and most Liberals do not want a ceasefire, but the NDP, the Bloc Québécois, and 25 of Trudeau's MPs are calling for one. There is no indication the government's language may evolve further than it already has. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
A clubhouse that once belonged to a Vancouver Island chapter of the Hells Angels is being demolished just weeks after a court ruling confirmed the BC government has the right to seize the property. BC's public safety minister says the teardown is, quote, only the beginning and puts organized crime on notice that criminals cannot profit from their activities. A Supreme Court of Canada ruling issued last month upheld a BC court's decision, finding an inescapable inference that the Nanaimo Clubhouse and other Hells Angels properties in Kelowna and East Vancouver were used for criminal activity. The ruling ended a legal battle that stretched more than a decade and confirmed BC's Civil Forfeiture Office could seize the clubhouses as proceeds of crime. Mike Farnworth did not say why the office had decided to level the Nanaimo Club. The Victoria NDP MP has presented a private member's bill to amend the criminal code to include controlling and coercive conduct, something that victims of intimate partner violence often face.
Coercive control is a pattern, and so things like taking away someone's passport or immigration documents, breaking their cell phone, tracking them online, denying them access to social media or other ways of communicating. It's really cutting them off from their support network often.
Collins says protecting people from coercive control can be crucial in preventing physical violence and the killing of women. Bill C-332 was introduced last May and is in its second reading in Parliament. The City of New Westminster has partnered with NGO Dan's Legacy to create a new initiative called Dan's Diner. It teaches at-risk youth how to cook and be involved in their community.
In 2022 alone, Dan's Legacy helped 600 youth find purpose, find stability, find community, find ways to build their lives. These ripple effects are a really critical, form a critical part of our child and youth mental health system.
Dan's Diner aims to give youth a safe place and alternative to gangs by offering paid work in a stable environment alongside their peers. The money is from the federal government through the Building Safer Communities Fund. Ottawa also announced more than $319 million in funding today to build 843 new rental homes in Surrey.
We will not slow down on building more rental housing. We are determined to build more homes that will foster stronger communities and offer families more stable and secure living options.
The money comes from the Rental Construction Financing Initiative and will be used to help build rental homes across 3 projects in Surrey. One is the restoration of the North Surrey Medical Building and will include commercial space and up to 400 new homes. Speaking of homes, home sales in Canada have slowed again. The figures for October show sales dropped 5.6% compared to September, with both buyers and sellers stepping away from the market. The CBC's Anis Haidari has the details.
Canada's real estate market is hibernating early. Home sales taking their usual pre-winter slump already in October, at least according to the Canadian Real Estate Association. Fewer homes were listed month over month, the first drop since March. Average prices are up compared to last year, 2% nationally, 2.7% in Ontario, 3.9% in BC, 5.1% in Alberta. But industry players say signs of a slowdown are everywhere.
It's funny, a year ago, the sales are up 17%, but what we've seen overall, the trend has leveled out. We've seen it right now, we're not as many multiple offers.
Even with record high prices, Calgary's market isn't immune.
People are going to be more waiting to see what's going to happen in February, March with the interest rates and what our economy is going to do.
Higher interest rates mean higher monthly mortgage payments. Some buyers may be waiting for those to drop.
This is a market that now is, trying to cope and adjust to higher interest rate, and it's going to take some time, probably into next year to fully adjust.
Sellers are adjusting too, and in some cases, staying put. The number of new listings relative to sales is the lowest in a decade. But prices may not fall because Canada's population keeps increasing faster than housing supply.
We're likely to see the reappearance of those very, very strong tensions between what the strong demand is from population growth and our ability to produce enough housing units to accommodate that growth.
The Canadian Real Estate Association says it thinks sellers might be holding off until the spring, though even with a slowdown, prices aren't plummeting. So affordability is still a concern for many. Anis Haidari, CBC News, Calgary.
Darius Mandavi joins us now with a first look at the weather. Coolish and relatively calm today, at least from the weather I saw.
That's right. Okay. All right. I'm done. That's
Very
it.
good. All right.
You did it. Great work,
Sweet.
Dan. Yeah, that's pretty much the story. We did have some snow blowing into the more southern parts of the interior. We were pretty much calm across the north. That's going to flip tomorrow when we start to see more precipitation push from the coast into the northern interior, and we have a very sunny day throughout the southern part of BC. So if we take a look here, you can see, there we go. You can see that rain already starting to push in. This is model data, but it is pretty much what we are seeing. You can see that rain is going to start making its way into the coast, into parts of northern BC, bringing plenty of snow to some places, and continue to make its way into parts of central BC, but not expecting too much here. We're going to be cloudy pretty much north of the Caribou starting tomorrow over the next couple days, but not expecting precipitation in the Caribou, really just Prince George and further north, whereas here in the south, we're just looking sunny and, like you said, pretty much cool, like around seasonal pretty much, but we're coming up a couple degrees across the south. It's been very cold for the more southern parts of the interior lately, so they're coming up. Here on the coast, go up maybe a degree or two, but should be pretty nice and sunny over the next couple days. You can see those clear skies tonight, continuing to clear up in the south into tomorrow. And here in Vancouver, we do have a very nice day. Definitely getting chilly at night, not quite hitting the negatives, but we're getting close. So enjoy the sun while it's out during the day.
Good advice. Thanks again.
Thanks, Dan.
Santa Clauses are coming to Metrotown for the holiday season. This year, you will be able to take photos with several jolly old elves at the province's largest mall. They include the traditional Father Christmas, as well as Global Santa, Kris Kringle, and Tropical Santa. Metrotown says it's trying to represent many versions of Christmas that exist among families in BC.
In today's world, it's all about having all sorts to choose from. So we've got the younger Santa, which is Kris Kringle, and then Global Santa, we want to be diverse and speak to all different nationalities.
All of the Santas will appear throughout the shopping center on select dates until December 23rd. However, Tropical Santa will pop by between December 27th to 30th during his post-holiday travels. Health Canada is pushing a bee vaccine to fight a spike in disease. Our Darius Madavi will explain the research that needs to happen before the insects can get the jab. That's next. Hello, everyone who's watching our commercial-free live stream. Thanks for being here. Food inflation and food insecurity are problems across Nova Scotia. While there are resources to help in larger communities, rural areas are often lacking. Brittany Wenzel has more on how some groups in Cape Breton are trying to change that.
In Sydney, it's not hard to find a food bank or even a food pantry if you're hungry. But along the scenic river, valley, and hills of the Margaries, getting help can be more difficult.
We don't have a store on every corner. We don't have all of the amenities of larger towns and or cities.
Liz Birch is a member of the Northeast Margaree Seniors and Pensioners Club.
I certainly have seen struggle. We're blessed to have a community that is caring and helpful to one another. So I can't honestly say that I would have seen anybody who's, shall we say, down and out. But I certainly have seen where a single senior has no other options.
That's something Kristen Muntz wants to help with. She's a part of an effort to get a branch of Meals on Wheels established in the Margarees. The Shedda-Camp branch provided 10 people with meals in the area as a part of a pilot project. But in order to expand, Muntz says it needs to be local.
You know, it's about between 30 and 40 kilometers. So, and we only have one grocery store, a central grocery store. And it's tough for a lot of seniors to get out in the winter, let alone during the year, to be able to shop for groceries.
It's not just seniors having trouble with food insecurity. The Margaree Food Security Program gives out gift cards to the local co-op to people in need. It started because of concerns there may be people struggling unnoticed.
The rising cost of food. We are in a very rural area of Cape Breton. A lot of people depend on seasonal employment, and then there's employment insurance during the winter. We have a large senior population here who would be on a very fixed income. And it was the general feeling that things weren't going to get better.
Area Councillor Blair Phillips has been getting increasing calls from people looking for help.
A lot of times there'll be a senior who has lost their spouse, so their money is cut in half. So I mean, with the price of oil and just daily living, it's hard to make ends meet.
Food insecurity is on the agenda for Inverness County Council's first meeting of 2024, and Council plans to collaborate with these organizations to tackle the issue of food insecurity, an issue that is becoming all too common in rural areas. Brittany Wenzel, CBC News, Sydney.
You may have seen bumper stickers that say, "Save the bees," and wondered from what? Well, a disease called American foul brood is wiping out honeybee hives across Canada and posing a serious risk to the future of agriculture in our province. To combat this, Health Canada has conditionally approved a vaccine that could help slow the spread. For more on how it's given out and why it's so important is our science and climate specialist, Darius Madavi. Darius, how serious, first of all, is American foul brood?
Oh, it's hard to overstate just how dangerous this disease is. Now, American foul brood is caused by a bacteria infecting the beehive. There's a few reasons it's so devastating. Now, it's a spore-forming bacteria, meaning it's really easy to transmit and spread, but incredibly difficult to kill. It also affects the bee larvae, meaning the baby bees, the next generation of bees are what's most affected. And since honeybees live in colonies in their beehives, it's really easy for disease to spread among that tight-knit community. They're also very social creatures. They like to visit each other and other hives, and that can spread disease up to 10 kilometers away to other communities. So to get a better idea of just how scary American foul brood can be, I spoke with Susan Cormier, a writer and beekeeper in Langley.
We have had an outbreak of European foul brood in the area. It will knock back your hives. You've got to work really hard to take care of your hives. You will lose some hives, but there's a chance of survival. However, American foul brood, until recently, the only treatment has been to euthanize your hives and burn all the equipment associated with those infected colonies.
Now, it's worth noting that unlike some other bee diseases, this does not affect our native bees, which tend to lead more solitary lives. But foul brood has also been growing as a threat in recent years. There are just more hives across the province. There's a trend that experts call bee havers versus beekeepers, people with good intentions that want to keep bees and help save them, but they don't do a great job of maintaining them, so disease can spread to other hives as well. And antibiotic use for animals is much more tightly controlled than it used to be. So there are very limited options for treating and preventing the disease, which makes news of this vaccine all the more welcome.
So, not to put too fine a point in it, do the bees have to roll up their sleeves, their stingers to get the vaccine? How's this going to work?
Fortunately, no. Can you imagine what a nightmare that would be? It has been tried, but the injection stressed the queen out too much. So this new vaccine is actually an oral one, and the way it works is very cool. So take a look at this. You can see that here, the worker bee takes in the sugar, the food that contains the vaccine. From there, the worker goes to visit the queen and feeds the queen royal jelly, which it secretes from a gland in its mouth, so it feeds the queen. Then what the queen gets, the royal jelly, also contains the vaccine. So from there, the queen passes that vaccine into her ovaries, and as she lays eggs, the eggs now contain the vaccine as well. So that means that as those eggs hatch and turn into larvae, those eggs already have the vaccine. They already have developed some immunity to the disease, and so they can greatly decrease the rate of infection among the larvae. So it's a very incredible mechanism.
And so Health Canada, as we mentioned, has given the vaccine conditional approval. So take it, this is promising. What happens next?
Well, so far the vaccine has been tested in the lab and in the field in Europe, but not yet in Canada. So next spring, Health Canada will start allowing some commercial operations to use the vaccine with veterinary supervision. But as BC's chief apiarist told me, there are other considerations beyond the results of those studies.
The queen is generally replaced after 2 years. So the question is, for a beekeeper, is it worthwhile to spend that money to vaccinate a queen that will only provide service for 2 years?
So you've got to think about the business as well as the science. The vaccine needs buy-in from the big players, but we can't forget our local beekeepers too. I asked Cormier if she would use the vaccine for her own bees.
Absolutely. The research so far is amazing. It's not as good as I'd like it to be. It doesn't have a 100% efficacy rate. It's about a 30 to 50% efficacy rate at vaccinating against the disease. However, that's much better than what we've had in the past.
So Dan, we'll have to see what results come in over the next year with these new studies. But even for the smaller local operations here in BC, there seems to be quite a buzz.
Darius Madavi, science and climate specialist. Thanks very much. More flooding has hit the Horn of Africa. As many as 500,000 people are on the move, while the UN is calling it a once-in-a-century event. That's next.
They're Japanese tourists, and as Ian Hannah-Mansing tells us, Eaton's and other stores are going all out to make them feel right at home.
A Monday morning staff briefing at Eaton's. The topic today, the Japanese yen.
Also, just for your information, some examples of the yen so that you can recognize it.
Starting this morning, customers can use yen at this store, and a Japanese translation service is a phone call away. All this to try to lure the affluent, expanding Japanese tourist trade to a very traditional Canadian department store.
It's a touch of something familiar to them, and it's a gesture of respect and the fact that we would like them to visit our store.
And it's quite a lucrative market. Japanese visitors spend more per person than any other tourists in Vancouver, $93 a day, $58 million last year.
It's the fastest growing market we have. About 175,000 of them came last year, and although they come for beauty, the fact is that their activity is shopping.
The impact of the Japanese tourist boom on the city is probably most evident on this street, where brand new stores catering almost exclusively to visitors from Japan are quickly filling up the block. This is the OK Gift Store, a favorite stop for a lot of Japanese tourists. Yuko Tsukamoto recently moved to Canada, but her mother is visiting and she's buying some gifts to take back. Tsukamoto says she feels at home at this store.
I can buy goods easily because staff or all staff is Japanese and the staff speak Japanese for me.
The people at Eaton's would like to make Japanese tourists equally comfortable here. They're not sure how long that will take. By late this afternoon, there were 5 sales in yen. Ian Hannamansing, CBC News, Vancouver.
The BC government says a new helpline and community funding worth more than $2 million is going to help tackle a concerning rise in racism and hate in this province. But as the CBC's Karis Hogg explains, BC's Human Rights Commissioner says there is a lot more work to do.
Acts of hate and racism will not be tolerated.
Rising tensions stemming from the war between Israel and Hamas, increasing incidents of anti-Asian hate, and hate directed at LGBTQS+ people. BC's Premier says a troubling rise in racism and hate has prompted the BC government to launch a new racist incident helpline. If someone reports a racist incident, it won't be passed on to police.
Sometimes we experience it so often that we ourselves aren't sure, is this a crime? And so we are also reluctant to call the police if we're kind of second guessing, is this a crime or is it not a crime?
Attorney General Nikki Sharma says the helpline is part of a wraparound approach to tackling hate and racism. She says work is underway to train and support police so they can properly investigate a hate crime when they see one.
It's also important that our Crown Counsel is ready to respond to hate crime and take it seriously. And right now, the prosecution service is actively updating their hate crime policy.
The Racist Incident Helpline will launch in the spring once staff are trained.
We know the urgency that this should be up and running as soon as possible.
BC's Human Rights Commissioner, who has called for action on hate, says this does not go far enough.
I was definitely underwhelmed. We know that it's time to move beyond nice words and into real actions. And I'm glad to see the province taking some steps in that direction. This doesn't go far enough and really doesn't address the majority of the recommendations that I've made to government.
The helpline will be run by BC 211, available province-wide, and offer trauma-informed help. The province is also offering community groups up to $10,000 to fight hate-motivated violence. Karis Hogg, CBC News, Vancouver.
A jury is now deciding whether Nathaniel Veltman murdered a Muslim family in Ontario in the name of terror. That verdict could come within hours. We're going to review now what was heard in court and what wasn't. Here's Thomas Dagley to explain the key evidence, some of it now public for the first time.
By the time an avowed white nationalist with a cross spray-painted on his T-shirt was being searched by London, Ontario police, he had attacked a Muslim family of 5. 4 were dead, and the killer was in the mood to talk.
Obviously, for what I did, obviously I'm gonna have enemies.
More than 2 years later, a jury has been shown hours of video evidence.
I want the world to know why I did what I did.
Seen pictures from inside his apartment and heard weeks of testimony. The defense even called the attacker as a witness.
There's shock as people wonder where exactly this is going.
Now, will Nathaniel Veltman be convicted of terrorism-motivated murder? Here's what jurors saw and what they didn't see. The night before the attack, Veltman testified he hit the road to Toronto, his mind in a dreamlike state, still reeling from a magic mushroom trip. When he said he came upon a group of Muslims, he felt an urge to run them over. But the jury didn't hear there's evidence Veltman had another target in mind as well. Prosecutors revealed directions to Toronto's Women's College Hospital were found on Veltman's smartphone. He had mused about attacking abortion providers, had a bag of weapons in his truck, and repeatedly viewed the writings of the man behind the deadly New Zealand mosque shootings.
They can end up believing that anything can be a threat.
Vanderbilt University professor Sophie Bjork-James has done extensive research on the white nationalist movement.
When people enact this kind of terrorist violence, they want to become heroes and celebrated and remembered by others and inspire others.
If someone were to cite this instance, this case, as inspiration to carry out violence in the future, how surprising would that be to you?
Not at all surprising.
In his London apartment, Veltman said he had been spending 12 hours a day or more consuming online conspiracy theories. On that sheet of paper, he had written down speeds and percentages, listing the likelihood of injury or death if a vehicle struck a pedestrian. Then on 2 separate occasions, in broad daylight on June 6, 2021, the court heard Veltman drove by groups of Muslims in London and again felt compelled to attack them. When he spotted the Afzals, he said he could no longer resist the urge, speeding towards a young boy, teenager Yumna, her mother Medea, grandmother Talat, and father Salman. I turned around, he recounted, stepped on the gas, and drove at them. The jury was shown pictures of the crash site with a road sign smashed to the ground. Members of the Muslim community sitting in the courtroom for the trial could at times be heard sobbing.
What we, I think, in the community are really asking for is justice in the fullest sense. I think there is confidence.
Uthman Quick speaks for the National Council of Canadian Muslims. They've kept in touch with family members of the victims.
I don't want to speak on behalf of the family in any sense, but you can only imagine the difficulty of having to listen to some of the details that have come out during the trial.
In the witness box, Veltman insisted he never had a plan to kill, and his goal wasn't to intimidate all Muslims. He was 20 years old at the time and testified he was depressed and paranoid, influenced by a strict fundamentalist Christian upbringing. A much different version of Veltman spoke openly to a police detective hours after the attack.
It was terrorism. I'm not gonna try to get a lighter sentence by saying it was just murder, not terrorism.
And there's more. The jury wasn't shown the part of this interview where Veltman said he first considered a terrorist attack when he was 13. In this parking lot, less than 5 minutes after he ran over the Afzal family, Veltman approached a taxi driver and ordered him to call 911.
It was me. It was me that did it. Come arrest me.
He put his hands on his head and got down on his knees. Veltman's future now is up to the jury.
Thomas Degler reporting. The Israeli military has staged a major operation inside a hospital in Gaza. Israeli Defense Force troops searched the Al-Shifa hospital for several hours. Israel says its soldiers found weapons and other evidence that the facility was being used as cover by Hamas. The CBC's Ellen Morrow has the latest on the military moves and the plight of the people in Gaza, and a warning for you: some of the images in this story may be disturbing.
Israel's military released this video claiming it found weapons and a Hamas command center inside Al-Shifa hospital. CBC News can't independently verify the claims. Soldiers are still searching inside the hospital, the military says. Several Hamas militants, it adds, were killed during the operation. Hamas denies using Al-Shifa as a base. Fierce fighting raged around the hospital for days. This video, released by the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry, claims to show the aftermath of Israeli shelling before the raid. CBC News can't independently verify it.
Everyone got really, really terrified and felt the situation is really difficult. They called the hospital administration and told them that we are planning to get in the Shifa buildings one by one, and we will be checking everywhere within the hospital. But again, it's totally scary situation. It's continuous shooting from the tanks.
Al-Shifa has been in crisis for weeks. Hundreds of patients and displaced people remain inside the facility, say doctors, with no fuel, food, or water. It's unclear what's going to happen to them. The most vulnerable, these tiny newborn babies, the hospital says it's struggling to keep alive. The World Health Organization called the military action totally unacceptable.
Hospitals are not battlegrounds. We're extremely worried for the safety of staff and patients.
Israel's prime minister defended the raid as part of Israel's fight to wipe out Hamas for the October 7th attacks. There is no place in Gaza that we will not reach, Benjamin Netanyahu says. There is no hiding for Hamas. At the Rafah border crossing with Egypt, some fuel is now being allowed in, but Israel is only allowing it to be used in UN trucks. None will be sent to Gaza's ailing hospitals, begging for fuel to keep vital equipment running. Israel fears it will end up being taken by Hamas. At this hospital in central Gaza, child after child after child injured in an Israeli airstrike. Suddenly, the rocket hit the floor above us, this man says. 3 of his kids, he adds, are missing. Outside, prayers for the dead. Yet more families here plunged into mourning. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Massive flooding is now hitting millions of people in Somalia as that country reels from torrential rains. Many have been forced from their homes as the water rises. Others are too scared to leave because of the danger lurking under the surface. Ithel Musa shows us scenes of a worsening disaster.
In southern Somalia, roads turned into rivers. We can't bring goods by plane, says this shop owner. There is a serious shortage of goods, fuel, and food. Another disaster just a year after severe drought brought Somalia to the brink of famine. Now, heavy rains are causing extreme flooding in what the UN calls a once-in-a-century event, threatening the lives and livelihoods of at least 4.3 million people. UN officials now warn a quarter of the country's population face crisis-level hunger or worse by year's end. And that's not the only danger. We can't go to some of the places in town, says this local resident. Because of the high water levels, we are afraid of crocodiles and other animals in the water. Officials say the flooding has already killed dozens and displaced nearly 500,000 people, and it could get worse as Somalia's heavy seasonal downpours are made worse by El Niño, a climate pattern typically associated with increased rainfall in the Horn of Africa.
Somalia is a country at the sharp edge of climate change, despite scarcely contributing any emissions itself. Droughts, floods, tropical storms are all too common. They're a big driver of the humanitarian crisis there. What we've really seen this year and across the last couple of years is just that pattern dialed up to 11, taken to the worst extremes.
The UN has released $25 million in emergency aid, but officials say Somalia needs more than money. It needs sustained international help to adapt and withstand the effects of climate change in the future. Idil Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
The Supreme Court in the United Kingdom has struck down a controversial government plan to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda. As Abby Kuathasan reports, it's a serious blow for Conservative Prime Minister Rishi Sunak.
Has your plan failed, Prime Minister?
A central pillar of Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's immigration policy has been knocked down by the Supreme Court. In a unanimous decision, the 5 justices say that deporting asylum seekers to Rwanda is unlawful, that Rwanda is not a safe place.
Rwanda has a poor human rights record. In recent times, British police have had to warn Rwandan nationals living in the UK of credible plans by the Rwandan government to kill them.
The UK scheme was first introduced by Boris Johnson last year in 2022, and it sought to deport asylum seekers to the East African country. From there, they would be permitted to apply for refugee status, wait for their claim to be processed, and if that claim was rejected, they would be sent back to their country of origin. The government here had said this would help deter people from making that dangerous crossing across the English Channel to Britain, but human rights groups have argued that this was a cruel policy and that Britain was simply looking to sidestep its international obligations. The Prime Minister Sunak has now responded to this ruling. He says this was not the outcome that they wanted, but that they were looking at all eventualities.
But let me say this again. If it becomes clear that our domestic legal frameworks or international conventions are still frustrating plans at that point, I am prepared to change our laws and revisit those international relationships. The British people expect us to do whatever it takes to stop the boats, and that is precisely what this government will deliver.
Changing the laws, really underscoring how important this immigration policy is to him. Now, we have to remember Rishi Sunak must call a general election before January 2025, but his outgoing Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has already called him a weak leader, says he's not the man for the job. Even one Tory MP publicly calling for a new Conservative leader as well. Rishi Sunak promised calm when he became Prime Minister, but it looks like chaos is brewing once again. Abby Kuathasan, CBC News, London.
Among the many farms destroyed in the Abbotsford flood 2 years ago, one was cultivating a very expensive, unique crop, saffron. Coming up, we're going to reconnect with the farmers 2 years later as they replant.
Up here, Kelsey Arsenault is at her best. Doing this since she was a kid. Serious about it, too. She studied music at Memorial University. She always dreamed of doing it to help people.
So my dream was music therapy. Ever since I heard about it, I dearly love the concept of it. I'm fascinated by the way that music works for non-musical things like social interaction and creative expression. So I wanted to be a music therapist.
years ago, she moved to Ontario to combine her love of music with healthcare, becoming an accredited music therapist.
So I was actively working 2 part-time music therapy positions, one through Eastern Health and then another in private practice. And yeah, I had about 28 clients at one point.
Her plan made perfect sense, and it might have worked in a different economy. Instead, she wound up juggling 3 jobs.
You know, I was getting by, but then I needed to pick up a 3rd job really to supplement my income because I just couldn't make my rent. And, you know, I had bills to pay. I had student loans from the degree I just got. So I got burnt out trying to do all 3 of these things at once. I was working in a bar doing serving shifts, and that was going on till 3 a.m. and then I was getting up in the morning and working with a little kid, and it just was exhausting.
Something had to give. She decided to drop her music therapy jobs, saying goodbye to 28 clients. She gave up the bar job too. Now, she works 9 to 5, an office job.
It came down to really needing to, you know, pay my bills, do what I had to do to survive. And it wasn't a matter of doing what I wanted to do, but just doing what I have to do for right now. You know, when you're starting a dream and you're going for it and you think that, like, this is gonna be it, like, I'm gonna be a music therapist, I'm gonna start my own private practice, and then you, like, get out in the real world and, like, you're trying to buy a block of cheese and you're like, this is not happening.
But it is happening to more and more people. Like Arsenault, they're leaving fields they've trained in, working other jobs to pay off an education that they're never going to use.
We're seeing these trends across lots of jobs, right? Folks going to school for degrees or diplomas or whatever it is, and then coming out and not necessarily being able to find work in their area, or as you said, you know, meaningful work, and then on top of that, that actually pays them a living wage. So this is a problem across sectors and across Canada in every province and territory.
For tonight, the burnout's behind her. Music may not pay the bills, but it's still part of her life. And for now, that's her therapy.
Mark your calendars. CBC's annual Food Bank Day is coming up on December 1st. Kick off the holiday season by watching our full day of special programming, streaming online at cbc.ca/foodbankday and on CBC Gem. It's all for an important cause: local food banks across BC. For more information, head to cbc.ca/foodbankday. We'll see you December 1st. Back to our top story now. Many BC farms were wiped out in the floods of 2021. On the Sumas Prairie, one farm was trying something a bit different. They were cultivating saffron, a crop that normally grows in places like Spain and Iran. Well, their plants were destroyed. The farmers were determined to start again. Arlene Young has this check-in 2 years later.
And so they just finished harvest. Didn't you? When was harvest for you?
I think we have 3 weeks ago we already harvest.
Right. And this is the saffron right here.
Yeah, this is
right?
happening.
Those, the 3 red stamen inside each of those crocuses.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, can I smell it? Isn't it beautiful? It's kind of like a little bit like leathery, herby, a little bit of honey. What do you smell when you smell it?
It's a very strong smell. And we are trying to start again.
When you came back to it and first looked at your property, I'm sure there was a lot to obviously, first of all, clean up. And then as you were thinking about rebuilding, you know, where did your mind go first?
Yeah, one time almost we have a $3 million loss, you know. But, you know, we are thankful we have everybody safe, you know. And but we try to rebuild again, you know. But I have one other house over there. We still not finished that one. You know.
You can't really insure these properties other than one insurer.
Yes, we don't have insurance because we are on the floodplain.
You're in a floodplain.
Yes, yeah. No insurance company covering.
But yet you still want to be here.
Yes, because you know, farming our passion, you know, and we are doing like 2005 from farming, and we wanna still doing farming.
Farming's your passion.
In this area, yeah.
Yeah.
Leanne Young reporting from Abbotsford today. Darius Madavi joins us with the forecast. I remember those stories when they first came out 2 years ago, Darius. Stunning damage, and wonderful to see some regrowth there.
Yes, it's a terrible story, but it's starting to be a nice ending, I guess. Not ending, I suppose.
A rebirth, perhaps?
It is,
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. It's very
renewal.
Nice. And nothing's better than saffron, so it's good, especially there. I'm glad to see the regrowth. Now, I think people might be wondering when the next time we're going to see rain is, because like I said, the next couple of days pretty dry here in the south, but it does sort of feel like the calm before the storm, as it usually is this time of year in BC. So if you take a look here, you can see this is a longer range model. We're going to look at, you can see that moisture coming into the north. We see that snow happening, rain for the coast. And as it breaks into the cooler parts of northern BC, we see that snow. And then it does make its way to parts of central BC, but very short-lived here over the next couple days. It's not until we get to Saturday that we start to see the first makings of that make its way to the coast. So early Saturday, potentially making its way to the west coast. Now, this is one of the earlier models. We are still a bit far away from Saturday, but some models saying that it could come a bit later than this. But at some point Saturday morning, expect to see something hit the south coast. And then again, later we see it come to Vancouver. Again, this is expected. Most models are saying later in the day. This is one of the earlier ones, but expect that we should see some precipitation on Saturday as that big system passes through. But by the time Saturday finishes up, when we get into Sunday, we're dry again here in BC, here in Vancouver, and then we see that system roll through the southern part of the interior. So expect it to be a pretty dry couple of days, except for that wet one on Saturday. If you look here at the accumulation over the next 48 hours, it's really all we're seeing is that snow building up in the north, a little bit of rain for the coast. So it's a very uneventful couple of days, to be honest with you. In terms of temperature, the southern interior sees temperatures come up, but everywhere else we're staying pretty much the same. A few places in the north seeing temperatures come up a little bit as well, but here on the coast, maybe a degree or two warmer, but nothing too different. If we take a look at our conditions for tomorrow, we see that sun forming in the south, still a little bit of cloud lingering, but by the afternoon, this should have cleared up as well. We see that cloud just in the Caribou and further north, and that precipitation making its way into parts of northern BC, but not further south than Prince George. And here in Vancouver, we see that sun coming out over the next couple of days. Even where we see some cloud, it should be, you should be able to still see the sun very much so on these days. Saturday, we do see that rain come temporarily, but overall, we're not looking too bad. It may be a frosty one tomorrow night, but overall, it's nothing to complain about. Pretty seasonal.
It's almost like we're into fall.
Right? Yeah. Well, except we're missing all the rain.
Thank you, Darius.
Thanks, Dan.
The group Architects Without Borders has launched a joint venture with a non-profit storefront in Montreal. Like the Habitat for Humanity Restore model, the shop encourages people to reuse construction materials. It's a way to cut waste and save some money. The CBC's Kwabena Ojuro dropped by to do some shopping.
From doorknobs to bathtubs to light fixtures, you can find all you need for a home renovation at the new Reco store.
People can come here in our brand new center and feel as comfortable to shop and identify products they like, just like they would do in a regular renovation center.
The items are donated from homeowners, contractors, and businesses.
People will come here and they would be glad to give a second life to these items.
With the cost of renovation materials rising, the store offers an economical option. It's a greener option too, helping reduce and reuse construction waste.
Construction architecture is responsible for more or less 30% of greenhouse gases, of trash, and of the resources we extract.
In return for a donation, you will get a receipt for a charitable donation.
When someone wants to make a donation, so we process that through communications, email, phone, pictures, and we have people who are specialized in appraising, in knowing the market, what sells, what does not.
The items are all sold tax-free. The proceeds will fund community projects through Architects Without Borders Quebec.
We have a mission to help the poor, to help the vulnerable communities.
The store will be open 5 days a week for now, and eventually every day of the week. If things go well with this store, the goal is to open a network of Recos across Quebec. Kwabena Ojuro, CBC News, Montreal.
Coming up, how a Vancouver Island woman is educating people about living with diabetes and creating community online. Stay with us.
Let's meet tonight's inquiring reporters. First, from the Toronto Daily Star, Gordon Sinclair. And from television, the lovely and talented Toby Robbins. Next, the eminent author, editor, and newspaperman, Pierre Burton. And finally, from the Toronto Telegram, Frank Tom Payne. Now meet our editor-in-chief on Front Page Challenge, Fred Davis.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. Well, first of all, let us welcome guest panelist Frank Tumpain. It's always a pleasure to welcome you to the panel, Frank. You realize, of course, you're sitting beside a very famous author there, the Klondike Kid. I'm just wondering, you're a columnist, too. Do you have anything in the works now?
Oh, yes, one in the works.
You're not going to take 7 years to let us read it, are you, as Pierre did?
No, I hope it'll be a little faster than that.
All right, fine.
Was this a musical show?
No.
Was it primarily a variety show?
No.
Was it a serial?
No, no.
It wasn't a dramatic. Was it a dramatic show of any kind?
Yes, yes, yes.
This was a
I guess.
Toby wants to guess.
Was it Orson Welles and was it Orson Welles, his show that shocked the nation?
All right, we'll give it to you on that in 3 minutes, Toby. Orson Welles' broadcast of War of the Worlds causes panic in the North America continent.
Tonight, Front Page Challenge welcomes a former member of Orson Welles' Mercury Theater who actually appeared on the War of the Worlds broadcast, Mr. Everett Sloan.
Mr. Sloan, looking back on this over a period of 20 years, do you think that this was an ethical thing for Orson Welles to do at that time?
Well, I think that nobody really at that time, with one possible exception, ever thought that people would take it as seriously as they did.
Who was the exception?
I was.
Tell us about that.
Well, it was just before we went on, and the fellow that you heard doing the first speech was a friend of mine by the name of Paul Stewart, who was with Orson for a long time. And just about, a couple of minutes before we went on, I had some vision or something, and I turned to him and I said, "Do you really think we ought to be doing this?" And he sort of laughed, and that's all that was said about it. But I did really definitely have the feeling before we went on the air that something odd was going to happen and that perhaps people would take it seriously. And I think I was the only one.
I was just going to say that, ask you, do you think then that you all underestimated the gullibility of the American public? Or the
Yes, I think everybody did. Mm-hmm. No question.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Bank. Join us for CBC British Columbia's annual Food Bank Day on December 1st. We're making the season kind with a special day of programming, all in support of local food banks across BC. This year, for the first time ever, you can watch our live stream of the day on CBC Gem and at cbc.ca/foodbankday. We'll see you on December 1st.
A Vancouver Island woman has gone viral for documenting her life with diabetes.
I want to share with you all today how I found my favorite devices to help me manage my type 1 diabetes and why they are my absolute favorite.
Mary Como has been living with type 1 diabetes for more than a decade. She's been sharing her journey and tips on how to stay healthy for about 2 years now, getting tens of millions of views. She says she wanted to find a community of people living with the same disease.
I found that a lot of people would say you need to take care of your blood sugars constantly, or, your kidneys could fail, or you could go blind, and all the scary things that can happen. And I felt like I heard that way too much, so I wanted to bring like a positive side online.
Como will be speaking at a BC Diabetes conference this week to mark Diabetes Awareness Month. Vancouver's very own Golden Boy has received the province's highest honor. Actor Ryan Reynolds was inducted into the Order of BC in a small ceremony today. Premier David Eby tweets that Reynolds, quote, exemplifies the best of British Columbia with his big heart, his love of family and his roots, and his use of his platform to make the world a better place. Other honorees will be inducted later this week. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube anytime at our website, cbc.ca/BC. I will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. We'll see you then.